All right, welcome to the NextCycle Michigan MICROS track launch. Thank you for joining us today. Before we jump into the exciting details on the micro track, I want to go over a few housekeeping notes. All attendees are muted. However, we do want to hear from you. Please use the Q&A button to submit your questions to our speakers. So if you look at your navigation panel that's part of your Zoom window, you'll see a Q&A button, not the chat button, the Q&A button. We'll have some time reserved near the end of our day with you today, and we'll answer some of those live. We are recording this webinar. It will be posted to the RS YouTube channel, and we'll send an email with the link out to all who have registered. Now let's walk through our agenda. So we've already accomplished number one. We're off to a fabulous start. Next up, we'll get an introduction from the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, also known as EGLE. NextCycle is an initiative of EGLE. Then we'll dive into the MICROS check, eligibility, application process, cycle timing, all the good details. Then we'll roll into an example of the type of project that MICROS track can support. And finally, we'll have something called wrap up, and that is really providing a few more project examples and a little more details around the logistics of MICROS track. And then I talked about those questions. We'll go over some of those live. So let's get started with our first speaker. Matt Flechter is a recycling market development specialist with EGLE. Matt, thanks for joining us. Go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Melissa. Thanks everybody for coming to this webinar today. This is an exciting day for us at EGLE and the team, because this is the first of 6 tracks that are launching. First I want to thank MRC and Centropolis and RRS and all of the partners that have worked to put this together, put NextCycle together, and also the Technical Advisory Council and the other advisory groups to help guide the panels. Many of you are on this call, and this work couldn't happen without you. So I just want to thank you first. Some of you on this call are probably wondering, what is NextCycle? Why do we have this new opportunity, and why are we doing things a little bit differently than we have in the past? And for me, it really comes down to equity, making sure that we are providing opportunities for all organizations and businesses in Michigan to grow the circular economy. One thing that we know with the funding mechanisms that we have through EGLE, through the traditional grant process, is a lot of times it's the haves that get the money, and the people that need additional technical assistance and support are left scratching their heads wondering why they didn't get funding. And so what NextCycle at its core is that level of assistance to support teams to get their projects going from idea into reality. It's a business incubator, it's a systems incubator. And so working together through our partners to allow opportunities to bring good ideas forward and then get them funded is what NextCycle is all about. This MICROS track is about $10,000 business incubator and idea incubator projects. A lot of them are going to set the groundwork into bigger projects, and others can be a little bit smaller that just need the lift of the $10,000 to get the project off the ground. We'll hear more about that in just a few minutes, but I would encourage each of you on this call and your colleagues that you work with to begin that process of thinking about who could be on the team, who you could work with, and what problems you're looking to solve, and then enter into that process and you'll get these details as well, enter into that process to figure out what additional resources are needed, technical, data, financial resources to get your project off the ground. But again, thank you all for being here today, and we look forward to the rest of the conversation. Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you, Matt. And next, we are going to dive into the MICROS track and get a better idea of how this works, who's eligible, what the benefits are of getting involved. And the person that's going to walk us through all of that is Megan Wiebe. She is an analyst for RRS. Megan, go ahead and take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Melissa, and thanks everybody for joining. I'm going to first talk a little bit more about NextCycle Michigan. Matt Flechter from Eagle did a great job of highlighting a couple of the points about this initiative, but I just wanted to say this is a really exciting initiative. It's collaborative. It's the first of its kind in Michigan. So it's got a really cool potential here. And the idea of the challenge tracks, like Matt said, there's six of them, and we're going to talk about one of them, MICROS, today. But the idea behind the challenge tracks is to help identify and incubate those ideas that are going to help Michigan move towards a circular economy. So moving towards where materials are not just disposed, but are given new life and help support the economy. The innovation challenges are guided by real data. So there was a gap analysis done that really highlights the gaps and also the opportunities around waste materials in Michigan. And the initiative is really about amplifying these state dollars with local government dollars, with private sector dollars to really help support these innovation challenges. And like Matt mentioned, this effort is really promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion and as a priority, and is seeking projects that will advance jobs, recycling access, career opportunities in underserved communities. And all of this initiative is working towards the state goal of 45% recycling rate, as well as aligning with the governor's climate goals and Michigan's Back to Work initiatives. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to highlight briefly about the economic benefits of reaching this 45% recycling rate in Michigan. Currently, the recycling rate is 18%, but if that rate were to triple, we're talking about over 100,000 jobs added, $9 billion in labor income, and over $30 billion in economic output. So to kind of relate that, that economic output is approaching Michigan's transportation industry, approaching its tourism industry in terms of level of economic output. So there's a big potential here with trying to close the loop with materials. So I'm going to get into MICROS specifically. I think that's why most of you are here. So MICROS, the tagline is small investments with big potential for Michigan's circular economy. The big point of this track is obviously the up to $10,000 grant money, really looking at moving forward projects that are recycling and recovery based. So it's called a challenge track because teams are being challenged to produce these innovative solutions for projects across the whole recycling supply chain. So the statement is pretty broad, but projects that are eligible for MICROS could be working with collecting or processing materials. They could be working on the end market side of things in terms of making projects or making products out of recycled content. And the track is also broad in terms of material. So it's material agnostic. It could be recycling solar panels, composting food scraps, recycling plastics, etc. Just briefly, so the obvious track benefit of applying and getting into MICROS is the up to $10,000 funding. But I also wanted to highlight here that we don't want to just give money to teams and have them do projects and that's it. We want to involve teams in MICROS into the larger NextCycle Michigan network and help provide them opportunities to connect with industry experts, other funders, local partners, and really help the teams grow beyond maybe their $10,000 project. So the eligibility is also fairly broad. There's a little bit of a theme here with MICROS. The material has to be from Michigan. So there's got to be some diversion reduction reuse project that's working with Michigan's materials. The funding there needs to be immediate need for the funding. So the $10,000 must be spent within 6 months. And the project needs to be $10,000 or under. Otherwise, if it's over that amount, we need to see that teams have access or have other ways to support the project so it can be implemented. And then the types of teams. So when we're talking about a team applying to a challenge track, it can be a nonprofit group, it can be a city, county group, a startup, or it could be an individual. This list here is not exhaustive, but what we'd really like to see in MICROS and across the other challenge tracks as well is that these teams be collaborative. So having partners across sector is really our goal here. So whether it's a nonprofit working with a university or something else, that's the goal. And then I just wanted to highlight, so I talked previously that there's 6 innovation challenge tracks, and there's a lot more details about all of these tracks on the NextCycle Michigan webpage, but I just wanted to highlight briefly the distinguishing characteristic of each of these tracks. So flows is our track for organics projects. I2P3 has to have a governmental partner. So it's really the public sector focused challenge track. MICROS acceptance equals up to $10,000 in funding. RIT is the startup, is the novel technology, think cutting edge recycling process. And then on the other side of that is recycling supply chain. That track is focused on infrastructure, things like MRF development and kind of big projects. And then roads is focused on projects that are using recycled input for pavers, for adding compost next to trailways, things like that. So I just wanted to sort of explain a little bit where MICROS fits into this, talking about these challenge tracks, because it is a little bit of a different animal. So acceptance into MICROS means up to $10,000 in funding. There's a little bit less consulting help. There's some available. And then there's not mandated events that teams will have to attend. There will be some optional networking events and things like that, but there's nothing that you'll have to attend if you get accepted into MICROS. And then on the other side, all of the other challenge tracks that I just talked about, they're much more of these traditional accelerator programs. So teams that get accepted will attend things like boot camps, they'll have individualized consulting, and they, at the end of the track, will be able to pitch or showcase their project for a larger funding amount. So as Matt Flechter was mentioning earlier, MICROS is kind of part of the early pipeline into some of these other bigger projects, into other accelerator programs. So we kind of want to start small and then help teams and projects potentially move into other spaces and grow. So that's it for me for now.
All right, thank you, Megan. Truly appreciate that overview. And she'll be back to give us a few more details before the end. But next up, we have a group presentation, as you can see by the two photos that you're looking at. And this section, it's going to provide an example of the type of project. So, Megan gave you these, broad-based ideas. MICROS team's open to a heck of a lot of stuff, up to $10,000. So, give us an idea. What we can do? That's where Kate and Carrie are going to come into play. Kate Martini is the sustainability specialist at Bell's Brewery in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Carrie Bliss is the customer experience and sustainability leader at Padnos out of Granville, Michigan. And person that isn't pictured is Nathan Smallwood. He's the president and CEO of the Kalamazoo Nature Center. Those three organizations collaborated. You heard Megan mention that collaboration. They collaborated on a project that has seen some great benefits. So I'm going to hand it off to Kate.
Hi, thanks for being here. You can get started with the next slide. So I wanted to give you a little bit of history about Bell's quickly. So we're located in Southwest Michigan. We were founded in 1985, and we are the 7th largest craft brewery in the United States. And we distribute across most of the United States, and we are 100% family owned and independent. You can go to the next one. So you might be familiar with our eccentric cafe in downtown Kalamazoo. So at that location, we operate a brew pub, a beer garden, and a general store. And this is where we brew beers that are tapped mostly at the brew pub. We hold special events. There's a full restaurant. The staff have worked really hard to create a safe indoor and outdoor experience. So if you're in town, I'm sure they'd love to see you. And then down in the right-hand corner, you'll see our production brewery. And this is about 7 miles east of downtown downtown Kalamazoo in Comstock, Michigan. So if you've ever had a Two Hearted or an Oberon anytime in the past decade or so, this is where it came to be. This is also where most of our grain bags are generated. You can go to the next slide. So every cool waste diversion project starts with a waste audit. Grain bags are no exception. That's what our team here is doing in that left-hand picture. Pre-COVID, obviously, we would love to get together and dig through trash again someday soon. So our grain bag situation, grain bags are made from a material called woven polypropylene. It's kind of a soft plastic, and it's fully recyclable, but it cannot go in mixed recycling dumpsters because of its size and the fact that it's that flexible material. The sorting facilities that handle waste from the mixed recycling dumpsters just don't have the capability to sort it out. And Carrie's going to talk a little bit more about that, but because of the value of the material, the shape and the weight, recyclers need to take it in really large quantities. So think like 900-pound bales of those bags, and then fill a semi-truck with those bales. So even though we were finding that about 15% of our landfill waste, because we had to put them in landfill, 15% of our landfill waste was grain bags, we still wouldn't be able to make a bale more than about every other month if it was just our grain bags. So it'd take us like 4 or 5 years to fill an entire truck with bales of grain bags. Can go to the next slide. So we always knew that if we wanted to get our grain bags recycled, we would have to find a larger quantity. We'd have to get some more people involved. And there's a great example of a grant-funded project done by a brewery in Colorado called Great Divide. And so this was kind of always in the back of my mind. And when Eagle announced that what was then called the Recycling Market Development Grant was an opportunity, we really jumped at that chance and brought on some more partners to make the project happen. So Kalamazoo Nature Center is our nonprofit partner. They're deeply entwined and respected in the Kalamazoo community, and they have goals of bringing people and businesses together for sustainable solutions. So it was a great fit for both of us. And then Padnos is committed as our recycling partner, and we legitimately could not do this project without them. All of our partners are super important, but a rock solid recycling partner literally makes or breaks a program like this. So then once we had those partners on board, we started recruiting some other breweries and manufacturing partners that use this type of woven polypropylene material for grain bags. Some of the larger, so Calsec is on there, they make a lot of super sacks. So those are recyclable materials as well. So we started with a pilot group of these partners just to make sure that We had our logistics for drop-offs kind of nailed down before we opened up more broadly to the general Kalamazoo area. So we recently had a press release go out and we've opened that up. So we have some new partners, and our drop-offs are picking up and the system's rolling really well. So you can go to the next slide. So this is what our system looks like. The grant funded 2 balers and an industrial floor scale. So we use one of the balers for the woven polypropylene material, and then we use the other one for cardboard. And this was based on that Great Divide example. The cardboard generates a small revenue through rebates for us. So it allows us to have a little bit of a fund to maintain the balers and maintain the program. Also, a lot of the smaller partners we have are paying for a cardboard dumpster at their location. And we're offering free drop-off service. So it saves them the cost of the cardboard dumpster and helps fund some of the program too. So the people in this picture are a downtown team that make the drop-offs and happen, and they run the balers. And so they really deserve huge props for running all these collections with a ton of enthusiasm. They really enjoy seeing people bring us materials, because that's what makes the project function. Can go to the next slide. So here's a picture of our very first bale, a lot of super sacks and some grain bags mixed in. And so it's been really great to watch this come together and to work with all of the different partners, and just happy to announce that we're officially recycling grain bags for the first time since 1985 because of this grant. It's very impactful and meaningful. So thank you. I was supposed to say thank you on that slide too. Double thanks. I'll turn it over to Carrie.
Great. Thank you so much, Kate. It has been a pleasure to work with you, and your ability to get stakeholders to come together to make this grant and the solution happen. I give you huge kudos. That's the hard part of all of this. The actual recycling is easy in comparison to getting everyone together. PADNUS was founded in Holland, Michigan in 1905. We're a 4-generation family-owned and operated 24-location recycler. We are an industrial recycler that handles paper, plastic, metals, and electronics. In the last year, we did right around 3 billion pounds of recycled material, just to kind of give you an idea of the scale and size of what we do. And I'm going to go a little bit into more of what happens to those super sacks. Next slide. And so here you'll see our purpose statement: continue to find ways to innovate, lead, and make a positive impact in this world. Driving force behind everything that we do. We really try to be innovative in just never saying no, right? So it's always, well, what if, or how could we, whenever we go to approach a problem. Recycling is a challenge. The markets are changing all the time. The materials are significantly more complicated than the average consumer realizes. But we're lucky at PADNUS that we just have a great group of people with engineers, and some of our team members have worked there for 30 years, 40 years, and they just bring a lot of knowledge that helps us solve some of these challenges. Next. This gives you a little bit of the scope of who we serve. So certainly we are greatly in the Midwest, Michigan area. That's why that area is so dense with red dots. But we do work with people all over the world. And that's something important to realize with the whole recycling cycle is it is a commodity. It is something that is traded based on the value, and definitely is a function of supply and demand. So the markets can have a pretty huge impact on where materials go. And we love, to have them circulate right in the state of Michigan. There's a lot of local benefits for that. But if someone's paying $1 more a pound for it over in Asia, well, that's probably where that material is going to end up going. So you can't get away from supply and demand and the market forces that operate most of the world. Next. So I thought this slide was a good one to share. It talks a little bit about carbon footprint and the importance of densification. So, I like using film as an example. Super sacks are about the same as the film, but these things are very light and fluffy. So it's not really just about the amount of pounds that you're recycling. It's about a space that it would take up in a landfill or space it takes up if it's not baled. It's about a 22-to-1 ratio. So if you think about that, you're saving 22 trips of a truck going down the road from wherever those materials are generated to where they get recycled by using this baler. So it's a pretty huge benefit. And of course, not having 22 extra trips, whether it's 100 miles or 10 miles, is saving greenhouse gas. Next. So this is a pretty good picture of the machine that we can process super sacks on. It's called an ARIMA, and they make really the best equipment for doing this type of stuff. Films, they can do TPV sheets. We even do some pill bottles on this equipment. It's an all-in-one machine. So it has that first little hood thing you see there is a metal detector. So first it's going to decide whether there's any metal in that, because that can damage the equipment pretty severely. So it gives a rejection and a bypass if there's any metal. Then it's going to take it and grind this material up, but it's a special type of grinder that doesn't get wrapped by the film and the long lengthy material. So your typical process that happens is more of a rotor, and that would not work for these materials because they would just wrap around it and the material would jam up the equipment. So this grinds it in a way that allows it to go into the densification chamber and get compressed so that it can be extruded with a giant screw and then turned into a pellet. That pellet then is suitable to go back into an injection mold press or extrusion process, depending on what the material specifications are for the customer. Next slide. This is a picture of our float sink or density separator tank. We have ours set up to do olefins, which the super sacks being a polypropylene is an olefin. It would be hard to use to sort things that are super light. So it wouldn't work really well for me to take a polypropylene film and an LDP film and try to sort them from one another. But it works really good if that metal detector goes off and it shows that there's some metal or dirt or some sort of foreign material. It can help clean it up so that something that would be landfill now is recyclable. It also does a good job of separating heavier filled materials like a glass filled polypropylene from the polypropylene super sack. Next slide. This is a picture of our plastic manufacturing plant. So we have 3 different extrusion lines set up here where we're truly manufacturing a pellet. We can compound here, we can add glass fillers, talc fillers, colorant, different modifiers, really whatever is needed for a customer's mechanical and technical specifications. Next. And that's just a picture of what it looks like when it's being extruded. It's probably my favorite part. When they go to set up this extruder, they grab those strands and they're really easy to break and they string them along. It's the coolest thing. They're warm, but you can touch them and they go into that water to be cooled off enough to be able to be shaped into a pellet with a cutter. Next. And this is a blender. Having a huge commercial style blender is very important because often the end user of these plastics is wanting to use recycled content, but they don't necessarily want to use 100% recycled content. So for them, they may want to do, let's say 20% recycled content. So they'll give us their prime material, whatever that original, brand new, not recycled content, and we'll blend it for them, put it into a bulk truck or a silo, whatever it is that they have going on, so that it already is mixed at the perfect rate for them to be able to process. Next. And this is kind of a picture of what that conveyance looks like, whether it's going in a silo direct or a bulk truck to a silo, and it could go into a Gaylord box as well. Next. And this is a picture of our lab. You'd be amazed at how much testing goes into each box of plastic that we produce. There's multiple samples taken of each box. There's all sorts of tests done, everything from melt flow tests to density tests to IZ, impact, tensile, there's cold temperature impact. It really depends, again, on those technical specifications. Next. And this is a picture of our small injection mold press. So every time we make a new box of material, we make a plaque, a test plaque or a dog bone, so that we have a sample and can trace back exactly what's going on with that material and understanding how it performs. Next. So that little picture in the bottom corner there that has the QR code, that's super important. So that is our inventory tracking system. From the moment we pick up customers' material and it hits our scales and is weighed in, this barcode follows that material. I think of it like chain of custody, right? We need to know everything that goes in. You saw that 22:1 scale. Well, there's a similar scale to that when you have pieces, even a bale of material down to a pellet of material. So it may take a bale of material, like 2-3 bales to make a single Gaylord. Well, I need to be able to go and track that material all the way through its life cycle so that I make sure that I'm being consistent with the quality that I'm providing the customer. And if at any point that we're doing our pause to test the material for quality, I need to be able to recognize, hey, there's something that went wrong and trace it back so I can do a root cause analysis and fix the problem at the start. Next. And so this is some example of what the super sacks might become. So they start out as that bag, that grain sack or super sack. You can kind of see here how they get shredded in that ARIMA piece of equipment. Then it gets extruded through there into a pellet. And often it's going to go into a consumer durable like a dustpan. So not, you know, it's a polypropylene is a very useful utilitarian type material. It can go into a lot of different things. But a dustpan would be a great example. You'll also notice that it's black. So kind of like the famous Henry Ford quote, you can have it in any color you want as long as it's black. That applies to recycled content. It's not that we can't take recycled content. If it was like a natural milk jug and make it a color, we could. But black is by far the easiest and the most cost effective because it's, you know, it's a lot easier to go darker than lighter. Next. And so this is what our next evolution is. Like we finally decided that we've had some successes here. We've got a lot of closed loop programs helping Michigan with their materials, but so what's next? So we dedicated 18,000 square feet to innovation and are setting up a variety of types of equipment in here that is more the scale size of what one of our partners would use, one of our industrial customers would use, so that they could come and play and experience exactly what it's like to try to recycle their material. The idea being is if we can get them to either chop material, densify material, grind material, we can not only pay them more money for the material, which is helpful, but it allows for them to have a lot less freight trips. So it's really a win-win all the way around. And everyone is absolutely invited to come see this space. Bring material and play with us. It is a ton of fun. Next. Another partnership that we have going is with Goodwill. Eagle and Matt Flechter was super helpful in us getting this grant. I love this program. Every bit as much as I love the Bells program. We're training 18 to 24-year-olds that have had some sort of barrier to work. So that could be maybe they were a high school dropout, maybe they had some legal troubles, whatever that barrier is. And we're diving in deep to make sure that they're really learning the recycling industry, everything from taking apart electronics and understanding the different values of those metals to being able to bale plastics or chop banding. And then these individuals, when they graduate from the program, have opportunities to get jobs, whether that's at Padnos or at one of our customers, because now they're trained and experts on these materials and can help right at the source be able to recycle that material. So it's a great partnership and program, and we are looking to expand that to other Goodwills. The last, I forgot one important thing on that last slide is we do try to reuse before we recycle. So I think that that's an important part of the message when we're talking about recycling. Goodwill has a wonderful e-commerce program. They're very successful with it. We used to try to sell good electronics, things that had been wiped and reusable. were not so good at it. So we started sending them all of our e-commerce type materials, and they're successfully selling them on their e-store, which is fabulous. So always looking for partners in this is a big deal. Anywhere you can, it makes a difference. Now we can go on. My other big project, and this would probably be one that would be good for the challenge track as I build my team for it. ASR is auto shredder residue. So we have some giant shredders. They're big enough to eat a whole bus, just to give you a little bit of an idea of the scale. But the main thing that it's doing is it's collecting all of the metal out of that waste. And so if you can imagine what's in a car or a school bus, there's a lot of plastic that's left over. Unfortunately, there's also tires and foam and PVC and a lot of stuff that's not desirable. But we've started to collect samples and do some initial testing. People have been working on this for years, and it's not really that the technology isn't available. The technology is available. It's that no one's figured out how to make it cost effective. I have some ideas now of how this might work, and we're pretty excited. I mean, we're very hopeful that this is something we may be able to have a viable solution for by the end of this year. Next. And that was it. So thank you very much. I'm glad our technology worked because I am remote in Kauai, but I look forward to your questions, or if anyone is interested in having a recycling partner, feel free to reach out and we'll send it back, I think, to Matt.
Actually, you're going to send it back to me first, but thank you, Carrie and Kate. Very appreciative of the stories that you've shared with us. I love seeing original product going to collection and processing and then getting to that new full circle to that new product. Really inspiring, excellent examples of how a small investment and a great collaboration can have a significant impact. Now I'd like to invite Megan and Mac back to provide us with some additional information on the MICROS track. And right after, we'll open it up for questions. So if you haven't submitted your questions yet, use the Q&A button and we'll get them queued up. Megan and Matt, it's all yours.
Yeah, thanks, Melissa. And thanks, Carrie and Kate, for sharing those stories. I just wanted to tie back kind of the projects that they presented, and in my mind, what makes them compelling and what makes them compelling micro stories as well. And then maybe Matt can share his thoughts on it. The first thing I saw was partnerships. So having a team that was working with other partners in the area, nonprofits, businesses, that I think tells a really powerful story. And then the other thing is the impacts. You know, we saw the diversion impacts, but also going beyond that, there were the, you know, Kate and Carrie were talking about the other environmental impacts, you know, the emission saving, the carbon footprint, the equity impacts of being able to employ people that might have challenges to employment. That's a compelling story. And then I think also, so partnerships, impacts, and then I think the other thing for me is that growth impact, that ability to take a project, start it here, and then be able to bring in other partners, to go beyond that, to grow it. I think that's what makes a compelling micro story. But Matt, did you have thoughts on what they shared?
Well, first, thank you, Carrie and Kate. Working on this project has been really interesting. It's a small project, and so that's why we used it as an example here. With the green bags, it really was identifying that infrastructure, the small balers that are needed to make the markets work. If we don't have a place to get it baled up and transported, then the whole system breaks down. And you know, Megan mentioned the data that we're using to identify how we're going to achieve that 45% recycling rate. There's about $1 billion worth of investment that's going to be needed from local partners, state government, local government, and businesses and industry to achieve that 45% rate. And a lot of that is these balers sitting in a warehouse back where you can work collaboratively to make the economics work. So that's what was so compelling for me, is seeing this connection to the supply chain that, and really the nexus of infrastructure and markets. And as you know, Eagle still has, or maybe you don't know, I should tell you, Eagle still has market development and infrastructure grants. And those grants are going to be, that RFP will be out any day now. What NextCycle is, with these micro grants, is really working toward a process to make these projects even bigger. But as I mentioned before, making sure that we are looking at those underserved communities and people that don't traditionally get us access to the small $10,000 grants to really launch a project like this. We want to broaden that. And I think that what Megan was just getting at is those partnerships. That is absolutely the number one thing that happened when we reviewed this application to the Market Development Grant, and why it was selected is because Nathan, who's on here, with the Kalamazoo Nature Center, was working a nonprofit, working with a couple of for-profit businesses that were collaborating across that industry. Absolutely a compelling story. So thanks for sharing it.
Yeah, Melissa, do you want to jump to the next slide and maybe we can just highlight, Matt, are there any projects you wanted to highlight? Otherwise, I have a couple ideas on other types of MICROS projects.
Why don't you go ahead and I'll jump in.
Yeah, well, listening to Carrie presenting and Kate presenting, I was thinking about how different aspects of their projects could also be projects. So Kate was talking about the waste audit that they did. That's a starting point to figure out what next to do for diversion. That could be potentially a MICROS project. Carrie was talking about lab testing, all the lab testing that needs to go into those plastics. I think if you're a startup and you're working on a new product with recycled feedstock, that lab testing is really important. And that's where a MICROS investment could help you out, get that tested and get your product to the next stage. So those were a couple of my thoughts while listening to their presentations. So I guess we can move on to talking about the actual application. So as of this morning, the MICROS application is live. It is on the NextCycle Michigan webpage. And the first thing that you'll see when you click on the link there is that there's this application packet. And I would highly encourage anybody who's looking at or thinking about applying to MICROS is to start there. This PDF has, what we went over today. It has eligibility. It also has the criteria. It has more details on teams. And then as well, it outlines the questions that you'll be asked in the actual application. So yep, go look at this packet and I hope that answers a lot of questions. And then the second piece is the application is through an online portal. So that's where you will click the link, you'll head to a portal. You will have to first fill out a profile, which is really simple. It's just contact information. After you do your profile, you will be able to click on the MICROS application. And the form is really nice. You can save as you go, as you fill out the application. So you don't have to do it all in one sitting. And then the application is open today and it's open through the rest of the year. We're looking at 3 to 4 cycles of the MICROS track this year. So if you get your application in by May 19th, you'll be considered for the first cycle. If you get it in after May 19th, you're not quite ready, you've gotta find a partner or something else, your application will automatically roll to the next cycle. So, but yeah, May 19th for this first cycle. And then, so the resources, So for sure, go look at this application packet first and foremost. But then if you're looking for data for your project, or you want to learn more about how to write your story, I highly recommend the NextCycle Michigan resources page. It's right under the resources tab, and it's got a whole bunch of reports and data maps and stories that I think will help you developing your application. And then finally, it is in the packet, it is on the application portal, but if you need help with the application, please just email nextcyclemi@recycle.com and just tag it with MICROS. That way it will come our way. And then there's office hours, so you can sign up for a 20-minute one-on-one session. And this link is also in that portal on the web and in the packet. So you should be able to find it multiple places. And that way you can sign up for a one-on-one session and we can talk through your individual application. But like I said, I'm hoping that that packet addresses most of the questions. So with that, I think we can go to questions.
Yes, I want to, we're going to invite all of our speakers now to turn on their videos, turn on their mics, and we can stop sharing. We don't necessarily need the slide up. Let's see if we can get everybody all together on one screen if possible. And we do have questions coming in, so thank you, audience, for helping us out. I do want to give Nathan, who did not have a speaking opportunity, but I do want to call on him first, since he's the one face that you didn't see, and give him an opportunity to, if you could just briefly tell us, how the Nature Center was part of that collaboration, but also if you could lean into a little bit, people who are thinking about partnering with a nonprofit, can you provide some insight? How does one go about getting connected and starting that conversation?
Yeah, thanks for the program today and for the invitation to speak about it. It was a really great opportunity, and we were really happy to do it. Nature Center like ours, and we're one of the larger nature centers in the country, and I would say we're probably more than a nature center. We do a lot of sustainability work, and we try to not just have the bully pulpit to teach, but to demonstrate. But there are things that we couldn't demonstrate without a partnership like this. And so a chance to work, well, whoever says no to a chance to partner with a brewery, but not I, but a chance to work with some people who are really on the innovative edge, and the stuff that they were able to do with that waste stream is so consonant with our mission that it was a real honor to work and make an impact. So most of the things we do at the center are demonstration, but to get to do something that has a scale impact is not something we could often do. And so working with Bells and Padnos on that and using the Eagle grant for it was just right down Main Street. I guess what I would maybe say to some of the participants out there is think outside the box a little bit. So part of the reason this partnership worked for us is that we bring our own markets here. And so we do the storytelling. That's what we do for a living. And so to be able to take a project like this and shine a bright light on it and let people know what is possible, we brought that element to it. Whereas frankly, the other people did all the hard work. We just took the credit for it. But think outside the box a little bit in terms of what different partners can bring to a collaboration like this. So I'll stop there and let's see if there are other questions.
Perfect. I actually want to turn to Matt real quick here. There was a question, because we don't want to be causing confusion, but will the NextCycle challenge, inclusive of all of its tracks, be replacing the Recycling Market Development Grants Program?
So no, it does not replace, it adds to. We still have an RFP, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, that will be coming out soon. That is for both our infrastructure grant applications and the market development projects. NextCycle adds to that by creating an additional process for more diverse or focused teams. So on the MICROS side, this is new for us. At Eagle, one of the things that we've been challenged by over the past few years is ramping up to a speed of being able to deploy the Renew Michigan funds equitably and effectively. We've had many projects move out the door, and we're really proud of those. This year we have 23 market development grants moving through the process right now, and 23 infrastructure grants. What this does is it adds to our toolkit of resources that we can provide. We haven't had a small grant like this available in the past, so that's why we designed this in. And that's also why we launched it first, because we know that a lot of times to get projects ready for bigger and better, you need to start somewhere and start small and organize yourselves as a team. So absolutely, this adds to those existing grant opportunities.
Wonderful. Megan, I'm going to give you the $10,000 question that kind of pulls in from several folks. And I'm going to phrase it as, what is going to make a compelling MICROS grant application that will be selected? And I know it's hard to say because every project is going to be different, and it's, depending upon what's already established, what the money would be going for, that sort of thing. But can you give us a little bit of idea, maybe lean into a little bit of those eligibility requirements again?
Yeah, I think that for me, and Matt Flechter might have a little bit different perspective, but for me, the three things I'll say that I think would make a really compelling application are going to be the partnerships. So are beyond just an individual or individual company, are there ways that you can partner with somebody else in your community? I think that's compelling. I think that the impacts, not just diversion impacts and what you're going to reduce or reuse, but going beyond that, and are there economic? Are there other environmental? Are you going to reduce air pollution by your project? Are there equity impacts? Is this project going to serve somewhere that doesn't have recycling access? So I think all of those impacts are really important, and anything that's quantifiable, obviously, if we can put a number to it and measure it, that's also awesome and great, but understanding that's not always possible. And then I think growth potential. So we've talked a lot about MICROS being the stepping stone. It's the first step to the next step, so I think projects that are going to have a little bit more compelling story are going to be the ones that we can see, we can invest $10,000 in this team. They can grow in partnerships. They could do it somewhere else. They can make this into a bigger project.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are great examples. I want to put an exclamation point on two different ones that you already mentioned, but to add to that, and that is the climate impacts. Being able to tell our climate story in Michigan is really important. So thinking about that, how that ties in to what the outcomes are going to be from the grant, very important. And then also equity, underserved communities, places that do not traditionally haven't received funds in the past. Those are a high level importance. That said, one of the things that we do at Eagle is make sure that we are creating that stepping stone, that it's not subsidizing existing activities, but it's really creating that launching pad to grow. So I think a compelling project really shows that work is either being done to get to a stable financial business model, making that business case for recycling, or a local government funding model that wouldn't be dependent on additional grants. And if you're on this call, this is not surprising to you. Anytime government talks about funding, that's what we want to hear. We want to make sure that we're creating those conditions where that project can thrive, not be continually going back and saying where are we going to get that next donation or funding mechanism. Like creating a sustainable business model is what is most compelling.
Kate, I wanted to ask you, being that you had a small project and it was funded and you collaborated and you made this happen, obviously with, it took a village, right? But Can you talk about if you didn't get the funding, like what difference did it make to actually go out and seek this funding?
I mean, fundamentally, I'm not sure we'd be able to recycle grain bags right now. I don't think we would. I think we would be putting all of that plastic material in a landfill. And not just us. When we got initial calculations from all of our original partners, we were looking at 26,000 pounds of recyclable plastic that was going into Michigan landfills every year. So that's the biggest part, you know. I think too, like building the relationship with PADNOS and with the Nature Center, we're only going to grow, I think, our relationships from here. Like we both already had some great conversations about other things. Carrie and I have been talking about a ton, and then someone asked a question that I don't think everyone got to see about potentially some more drop-offs of different types of material open to different types of people, and that's a great thing that the Nature Center is interested in helping with too. So it only goes up from here.
Very cool, very cool. We only have a couple of minutes left, and Megan, I wanted to ask you, there was a question that requested some clarification around what you meant by materials in Michigan or Michigan materials. Could you provide a little bit more clarification as our last answer? And for those that have submitted other questions, do not fret. What we're going to do is we'll make sure that we download those and we'll respond back via email to all that have registered, because they're very good questions that I think would be helpful to the entire audience and beyond. So Megan, could you give us a little more detail on Michigan materials?
Yeah, Michigan materials just means materials that are generated in the state of Michigan. So the distinguisher there is that teams could be from out of state of Michigan. So you could be a project team that's in Ohio or something like that, but you have to be recycling, diverting, reusing materials that are in the state of Michigan, if that makes sense. And then I was going to say one last thing. I saw a question about funding categories, because that came up a lot, and that is in that MICROS application packet. So it has a list there, an explanation there for those of you wondering, what all can I use the $10,000 for? So.
Well, that is all of the time that we have for today, and packed full of questions, wonderful information. Thank you to all of our panelists today for taking a part in this webinar and helping people to understand your actual experience, but also this upcoming MICROS track and the future tracks of NextCycle Michigan. So whether you want to develop an idea, help fund a portion of NextCycle Michigan, or just spread the word about this great initiative, make sure you connect with the NextCycle Michigan team. And you can do that by visiting the NextCycle Michigan website, which is nextcyclemichigan.com, or you can email them at nextcyclemi@recycle.com. Great information. Go download that packet. It's up on the site right now. Thank you again to all of our panelists and all of our attendees. Have a great day and be well.